Well, hello, folks. It is Wednesday, and we are not ranking a shmup on the Sega Genesis this week because we're done. We did the last one of them, the last one according to my sort of finagled, elaborate, slightly arbitrary criteria of what is and isn't a shmup last week. And so before moving on completely, I did want to just go over some final thoughts. Just kind of look over the whole thing. And after that, we're going to play some KO Flying Squadron. If you're watching this on YouTube, they might be separated into two separate videos, or maybe not, because I'm lazy. So I might just not bother. But anyway, so what I wanted to start with here is just, now that we have a complete list, just read it all down from number 1 down to number 50. So at number 1, our final game that I saved for last because I had a suspicion this was going to happen. Our final game is, or number 1, Musha. Classic from Compile that I forgot to put there. Now it's spelled correctly. Musha! At number 2, we get a game that kind of did its own thing. That's Battlemania Daiginjo. At number 3, Glaylancer, sometimes called Advanced Buster Hawk Glaylancer. At number 4, we have Thunder Force 4, also known as Lightning Force. Not Lightning Force. Lightning Force. At number 5, Soul Dees, which is the cartridge version of Soul Feast, also on the Sega CD. At number 6, Arrow Flash. Number 7, Thunder Force 3. Related to Thunder Force 4, obviously. Number 8, Wings of War. I didn't realize that got as high as it did. Huh. Number 9, Sagaya, which is connected to the Darius series. Number 10, Gaia Rez, which is easily the most challenging game in the top 10. Number 11, personal favorite, Raiden Trad. Number 12, Biohazard Battle. Number 13, Steel Empire. A really cool, really great game with some unfortunate flickering that kind of hurts the eyes. Number 14, Phalios. At number 15, Airbuster, real good-looking game. That one had a nice, clean visual style. Number 16, Troubleshooter, which is the prequel to Battlemania Daiginjo. It was just called Battlemania in Japan. At number 17, Fire Shark. That was a Toplan one, I think. Number 18, Eliminate Down. I know that one is a personal favorite of one of the YouTube viewers. At number 19, Vapor Trail. Number 20, Task Force Harrier EX. At number 21, Forgotten Worlds. I believe that game had in arcades, it had like a rotating joystick or something. Had a real interesting control style. I think it translated pretty well. Number 22, Hellfire. Number 23, Super Fantasy Zone. Again, I have very fond childhood memories of the Fantasy Zone series. I think it mostly does justice to that. Number 24, Elemental Master. Number 25, Twin Hawk. At number 26, Thunder Force 2. Little rough in comparison to the games that came after it, so it goes. At number 27, Undead Line. And I believe that game and Elemental Worlds were the two sort of, like you're a dude walking and you can shoot magic. And 28, Twin Cobra. At number 29, Fire Mustang. At number 30, Slap Fight MD. That was an old school arcade game that got a sort of modern remake, but the old retro version was far more compelling to me than the remake. But they're both on the same cartridge, so. Number 31, Mega Swiv, which is technically also on the Super Nintendo under the name Firepower 2000. At number 32, Space Invaders 91. At number 33, Somebody Set Up Us the Bomb. It's Zero Wing. Number 34 is Veritex. It was kind of a cool game that was visually a little busy for my taste. At number 35, probably the one game that I was more generous to than it really deserved, but I don't care, the Uzu Kaobukson, which I believe is the only Korean game on the list. And yeah, it's real janky, but it is very unique. At number 6, Curse. The game I was told was the worst shmup on the system. Landed on number 36 on my list. I thought it was all right. Number 37, Master of Weapon. Number 38, Insector X. That one, interesting idea. Didn't care for it. Number 39, Truxton. I know some people still give me grief for lowballing this one, but I did go back and I finished the first loop on the easiest difficulty setting, and oh my god, never again. Number 40, Viewpoint, the only isometric shmup on the list. At number 41, Grindstormer, which I had mistakenly listed as Storm Grinder for a significant portion of this series. And that is... as I came to find out, that is basically the transitional game between Toaplan, like the end of Toaplan and the beginning of Cave. So like there's some direct lineage from Grindstormer to Donpachi. Interesting history. I'd like to see the arcade version, but Genesis version was I didn't care for it. The arcade version might still be good though. I'm holding out judgment. Number 42, Darwin 4081, a very, very fun but also very, very confusing game. Number 43, Dangerous Seed, the only game I cleared on stream because I'd accidentally left it on the easiest difficulty. Number 44, Whip Rush, a game that I don't know, I feel like Whip Rush could have been good if they just tweaked some little details, because like I said at the time, losing that multi-directional shooting really hurts the game. Number 45, XDR, X Dazedly Ray. That's the game I double-checked and triple-checked to make sure it wasn't a bootleg, because it was kind of amateurish. Like I said, when we get down to these last 5 or 6 here, you start really hitting the Heavy Unit Mega Drive Special at 46. I don't even know what to say about that one. At number 47, Battle Squadron. At number 48, Crossfire, also known as Super Airwolf. Some neat ideas in there. The execution was just not where it needed to be. At number 49, Bioship Paladin, a game that I could not figure out the controls to save my life. And at the bottom of the game list, Mr. Peter Molyneux's favorite shooter, as I've been told, Xenon 2 Mega Blast. And thank you for the follow, Stardoman. I'm just going to call you Star. So Xenon 2, again, I don't know, I'm assuming the Amiga version is a bit better. I did play the Game Boy version, and that one turned out to be a surprising improvement over the Genesis game. But at any rate, yeah, so that's the list. A nice round number. We got top 50 games. Pretty cool stuff. And so, before we move on, the other thing I wanted to do, and I'm just going to bring this up real quick. Boop. And where'd it go? Come on. Where are you? Should be right here. Did I break it? I think I broke it. Oh. No, make it visible. It's still can't see it. Where'd it go? Oh, I see what I did. Okay. There we go. Here it is. Okay. And so I just wanted to sort of take a quick moment. This is just very quickly kind of slapped on. You can see it's not quite lined up. There's my hand. It's underneath. Look at that. Look at that. So here's basically kind of a sort of TED Talky kind of final thoughts here. So the goal of this was to specifically do a certain genre on a specific platform, and that just kind of made sure that everything was sort of on equal footing. And so I just going to place a bunch of arcade shooters, aka Shmups, but only ones that were officially released during the lifespan of the Sega Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive. And the idea was, of course, to go in with as fresh eyes as I could. So I made a point to avoid practicing any of these games in advance. And to just try and that's the other reason I saved Musha for last, was because that's the game that I had the most experience with prior to doing all of this. So I kind of wanted to let my skills lapse a little bit on that one, get a bit rusty, and try to make a decision without that clouding my judgment. Every game got almost an hour's worth of playtime. And how did I rank it? Well, it was mostly kind of gut checks and just what felt right to me at the moment, but I did have certain things that I was looking for. If we scroll over here, the big thing was controls and game feel. So just, when you got the controller in your hand, does it feel good to play? Does the ship feel like it's like you're in control of what it's doing? Just stuff like that. Just does everything feel right? Is it smooth? Is it intuitive to play? I'm a big proponent of sort of the hands on the controller experience. I like it when a game feels good to play. Next was mechanics. Does it do anything kind of interesting? Any unique mechanics? Any dull mechanics, for that matter? Just creative ideas. Like, what's your spin on the genre? Next was level design. Another very important aspect. Again, were there any, like, for instance, what I like to call gotcha moments, where something happens that you just had no way of anticipating other than having played the game before and knowing it was coming up? Next was presentation, so that's graphics, that's sound, that's music. That would also be things like story, if there is any, and even like visual storytelling, if there's any of that as well. And, like some rule of cool kind of stuff, if you got like that's certainly worth mentioning. And the last one, the kind of the wild card on the list, was approachability. And by that, I think you see that and your thought probably goes straight to difficulty. Was the game easy or hard? But more than that, it was just kind of, would I recommend this game to someone who isn't a fan of the genre? And I would say, for the majority of the games on like the higher end of the list, that is just wholeheartedly, absolutely yes. And it's like, yeah, it would come with the caveat that yes, this is historically these games are challenging by default. That's usually how they're made. A lot of them are coming from the arcades. Some are harder than others. But again, the idea, like, would you... If it's the kind of game that like you sort of have to be a dyed-in-the-wool shmup fan in order to really enjoy, that kind of hurt it for me. That was a bit of a different... And part of that is because I'm, kind of middling skill-wise. I'm not amazing at these games, and I just sort of think about them in terms of, like I said, would I recommend it? Would I recommend it to someone who doesn't play these types of games as much as I do? And so that was sort of my basic criteria. And if we look down here, so we got breakdown by year. And so as we can see, you had a few games early in the system's life, sort of that launch year period. You had 4 shooters. 1990, there was an absolute explosion. And an explosion of, varying quality, but some really good stuff, obviously. I know, it's funny to go back and look at reviews where you get the sense that at the time, maybe just the sheer number of these things, that people were just so spoiled for choice that I think some of these games maybe didn't get as reviewed as well as they could have been. I understand Musha in particular, to keep bringing it back to that game, got, somewhat warm but tepid reviews at the time and is retroactively considered a classic. But again, it was one among 20 games in this style that came out that year, so maybe that's a little understandable. Sort of slows down in 1991 with only 12 games. 92 only has 9. 93 has 3 games, and 1994 has 2. So you can really see, like, as the 90s start to kick off and like sort of the trends, particularly trends in arcades and what have you, you can almost tell, like, 1992, that's the same year as... Was it 92 or late 91 when Street Fighter 2 came out? I can't remember exactly, but the fighting game boom happened in 1992, and so, games that are ports of arcade games, you're starting to lean more towards the fighting games at that time. So the other thing that I did, I went over, for those of you who don't know, I maintained a big spreadsheet. Here, I'll link it in chat. ROTSG, I think. Yeah, and so I just went through that, and I just did like a manual count on a few things. So, among the years, that's where I got that information, and that information is kind of as best as I got it. None of this is perfect. But so, the format... 23 horizontal shmups, 20 vertical shmups, and other... That's just sort of a catch-all for things that didn't quite neatly fit into either horizontal or vertical. There's obviously one isometric game, and Thunder Force 2 had both top-down and horizontal sections. A couple games had free roaming. I consider that separate. What's interesting about this is that while I was streaming these games, it really felt to me like there were just twice as many horizontal as vertical. But when I went back and did the count, it was actually a pretty even split. And speaking of even splits that turned out to be a bit surprising, when I looked at the respawn conditions on these games, again, instant respawn, that is, as soon as you die, boom, your next chip immediately pops on the screen. 21 games, whereas 22 games bumped you back to a checkpoint, And the other 7 games it was mostly stuff where you had like health bars or, just other mechanics that played into it. So I just put them in. So 7 other, once again. And much like the formats here, it really felt like the overwhelming majority of these games used checkpoints. But I mean, when you look at the numbers, again, it's a very even split. And so the next thing I wanted to check out, I mentioned while I was counting down the games, there is the game Curse, aka the Curse line. And so the story goes, I watched a YouTube video, and I'm not going to name it. I don't want to call people out, even though, honestly, it's a pretty good video. But I still feel like I'm calling someone out, so I'll just say it was a YouTube video counting the worst games on the Genesis, and they considered Curse to be the absolute worst shooter on the system. And after playing it, I quite disagreed. So thus, the Curse line was born, where games above the Curse line were unequivocally good, and games below the Curse line, well, the idea was that the games below the Curse line would be bad, but that didn't quite work out. At any rate, as we know, Curse landed at number 36. So that means that 35 games landed above the Curse line, and 14 games landed below the Curse line. And as I wrote down here, of the games below the Curse line, there's only about 7 that I would argue are actually bad games. Some of them are a little rough, some of them are a little janky, some of them, you might call them mediocre. We'll get back to that in a minute. But as far as bad games, I would say out of 50, only the bottom 7, I would say, are, just don't even bother. These games, no, these games are stinkers. Everything else was at least somewhat worthwhile. And so to sort of the final breakdown, as I see it, I would call the top 11 games on this list excellent. Excellent games. Then 18 of those games, the next 18, I would say were good. They were good games. The next 14 on the list I would call mediocre, but with the caveat that mediocre or not, you could still potentially have an okay time with them. They're not miserable. You could still have fun with them. And then, like I said before, only the bottom 7 games I would actually call bad. And yeah, so that's the full breakdown of the thing that I did on this website in video form and what have you. I have not decided what my next ranking series is going to be. A friend of the channel, Greg Seward, suggested sticking with the Genesis but moving on to driving games. That's interesting. It's an interesting idea. Might also move on to shooters on a different platform. I'm also quite fond of puzzle games, so there might be a puzzle game thing we could do. Or I don't know. One thing I will say, I'm not going to be doing fighting games. And I'm not going to be doing fighting games because I'm real bad at them, and I don't really get how to play them. And also, I know for a fact there are fighting game experts out there doing ranked lists like this. I'm pretty sure someone is doing a ranked list like this of just fighting games, just 16-bit fighting games, or just fighting games on this or that platform. I'm sure someone's got that covered. At any rate, that is what I'm not going to do. Probably not going to do ranking of the role-playing games because that would take for freaking ever. But, yeah, so give me a moment. My throat is just a little bit raw at the moment. So you're going to pop a couple Fisherman's Friends here. Good to go. And so, with that all out of the way, this will either be the end of the video or the transition into KO Flying Squadron, depending on if I'm too lazy to edit the video.